Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, in my neck of the woods, in Virginia, I live in Richmond. In Charlottesville, there was a Unite the Right rally. That rally essentially featured a lot of what people would consider far-right, white nationalists, alt-right, etc., to whatever those mean. It was pushed back upon by people who were antagonistic to those aims, essentially people from the left. This devolved into one person dying, 19 people being injured, and a car essentially mowing down the crowd. I have footage of this. Let's take a look at this before proceeding. These are adults. These are adults. You know, it's funny. When I first saw this video, it annoyed me. And it's like every time I see the video, I get somewhat of a different feeling from it. The second time I watched it, it was this feeling put it this way, I'm experiencing it on different levels. I say it that way. From an intellectual point, people have the right to march. Period. They have a right to march. If you're living in a sandbox world, I know I say sandbox world a lot, but I pull that stuff out of our context because I try to make it a little bit more clear by giving an example in some world that doesn't necessarily have the constraints that we have. Say you lived in a free society, meaning a society where people are left to their own devices. Government is small enough or is large enough just to make sure that each and every person have the things that they need, and to make sure that private interest doesn't destroy the environment and ecology and all this other stuff. Beyond that, you're left to your own devices. In that particular world, will there still be people who may be somewhat offensive? Yes. Is it possible that those people will somehow unite and interact with one another? That answer is also yes. And in that world, will those people have the right to march? Yes. They have choice. They are beings of choice. And in having that choice, yes, they may aggregate towards one another and march. It's their right. They should be free to do so. They shouldn't be pelted and assailed when they're doing such a thing. I'd argue that it's more of a sign of irrelevance for them to be there and no one shows up. Just other people who for the most part believe the things that they themselves believe. It makes more of a statement. Opposition. Because now it's in the news. There's a spotlight on this particular thing. These guys are holding flags as if they're still fighting for the South. It's like, I'm going to bleed on the Confederate flag. As long as I have this flag in my hand, the South will never die. In their heads, reality looks a particular way. That reality to some degree was affirmed by essentially attacking them in their march. There's more of a sign of irrelevance to let those people have their own devices. And just from a legal standpoint, they should be all right to do it. They should be allowed to do it. That's the first way I experience it, just from a legal definition, just from a, well, look, if I myself have the right to march, yes, what they're saying is offensive. No, I don't particularly like what they're saying, but should they have a right to march? Yes, that's the first point. The second way I experience this is somewhat of an emotional level of, it's disheartening to see human beings acting this way. That's all. It's disheartening. It's disheartening on two fronts. One, no, it's the same point. The issue is class, not race. And they've been so contorted in regards to how they're viewing the world, and it's such through a reality space of race and identity. that it comes out in these weird ways. Like, so, the aberrant behavior in this case. You have two parties that focus on this issue of identity because they didn't necessarily want to have the conversation about economics. Any conversation about economics will adversely affect the people who are paying them. So they're not going to have those conversations. The conversations that they can have, that they can afford to have, is on identity. So one party goes with the idea of multiculturalism, the other party goes with the idea of the party of whites. You have a schism in your society at that point, exacerbated by the parties themselves who are focusing on this particular schism to get votes and to get people in the ballots or to win votes. The issue is class. The issue is not race. And I know some of the whites are looking at this as if they're losing out. You're not losing out, dude. What you're saying is this thing of normalizing. So you would have whites who were dominant for the most part for the entirety of this particular country's history. You get back to the 60s, 70s, you have this idea of a civil rights movement where African Americans are fighting hard to try to gain some level of parity in society. One of the parties takes up multiculturalism. So yeah, there's a somewhat of a normalizing with regards to races in society. You put economic stress on that society at the exact same time where there's somewhat of a normalizing of races. And I don't think it's crazy for some of the people to look at their status going down and making some connection with race. Now, they're wrong to do it, but whether they're wrong or not is kind of besides the point. The only way to win is not to fight. If these people want to march, let them march. I don't necessarily have to be there. It's their right to do so. Violence, in this case, begets violence, meaning they themselves start to self-perpetuate themselves. So you have somebody there, somebody does something, somebody else does something, and now each person have their atrocities that they feel that they need to fight against. It's disheartening to see human beings behaving this way. It's immensely disheartening to see them behaving this way on the lines of race. Meaning you have somebody who's holding a Black Lives Matter flag and somebody else who's holding a Confederate flag. It's disheartening, that's all. They have the right to march. I don't have to like what they're saying. I don't have to like what they're standing for. But ultimately, there may be a situation where you yourself want that right, and society may not necessarily like what you yourself are saying. You can make the point that you have the right to protest. That's fair enough, but this is not a protest. This is a street fight. This is a street fight with shields and batons. That's all I'm saying. It makes more of a statement, man. Irrelevance, apathy is more of a statement than trying to confront something like this. You're not at a situation where this is just going gangbusters and taking over. Nobody would have even known that this particular rally took place. But now it's in the Guardian. Now it's in the magazines. Now it's in the newspaper. Donald Trump even commented on it. He even got the President of the United States commented on it. So, good job, left. Let people march. Let people give their speeches. You may have some feelings about it. Your feelings are perfectly fine. Your feelings are perfectly valid. But so are theirs. No, they're not right. Yes, I believe that ideology is wrong. Doesn't matter. It's a moot point. If they want to march, they have the right to march. Same way that you have a right to march, you complain. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, write, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the work through Patreon. Thank you.